what's the next year or next, say, set of years that's going to make us go, oh, we're in the post 2030 world? Like, what are we heading towards? I don't want to have my editor say Abhijit Chavda predicts World War III for the
I know. I
85th
hope
time,
not.
right? You're you're quite famous on YouTube for people, podcasters
I
doing
have
that.
never spoken about World War III, but people put those titles in some thumbnails.
They've all been trained by Zoom TV and NDTV. This is for all the talk about sorry, Aaj Tak, all the talk about podcasters not clickbaiting. It's famously untrue. But what I mean to say is
Hmm.
that what is a significant decade where the tectonic plates of how the world's powers operate completely shift? And you talked about a lot about a multipolar world, right? So what is that great event that we're gonna see on a timeline? Maybe it's okay. Maybe it's the AI revolution, right? Maybe it's the inevitability of a bunch of wars. Maybe it's regime changes. Where if we're living in a post 1945 world where the rules haven't really changed, what is that next event?
It's this decade. This is the decade of change.
The 2020s?
Yes, the next 5 years are going to be critical. They're going to shape the world. And the next 5 years are going to be make or break for India. They're going to decide whether India becomes a US vassal
Mm-hmm.
or India becomes a genuinely great power eventually down the line. So this is right now what we are seeing is the slow but very visible reconfiguration of the global world order. So what we used to have for the longest time since 45 is what the Americans liked to call the rules-based world order.
Mm-hmm.
The rules which they had made up and they had applied on the world. And we had these institutions like the IMF and the World Bank and the World Trade Organization and the United Nations and so on. I mean, now if you look at these organizations, Trump has torn up the WTO, World Trade Organization playbook by imposing random tariffs on all the nations.
Mm-hmm.
So the WTO is essentially defunct. It no
Right.
longer is relevant. What about the United Nations? Is the United Nations relevant? I don't see any relevance of the United Nations today. And that's why
Mm.
Trump has created this board of peace for Gaza, on which he has got various terrorist nations like Pakistan on
Yeah.
board and none of the major nations. So the US is trying to actively reconfigure the world order. The UN is irrelevant. There is a board of peace for Gaza. All the trade relationships have been, torn asunder by Trump, and he is reimposing one-on-one relations or one-on-one relationships with various nations. NATO seems to be under question now. If Trump goes and annexes Greenland, what happens to NATO? Can Denmark invoke Article 5 of NATO on the US?
Hmm.
When NATO is owned by the US, how can it do that? So NATO becomes is brought under question. The EU, what is the future of the EU? I mean, that's also a big question. I mean, is the EU going to be relevant, or is Trump going to force the dissolution of the EU also in some de facto way or not? So, and I mean, what about the Indo-Pacific, Asia-Pacific region? We have Pakistan that the US is openly supporting now against India. How long can Pakistan last? It will last as long as the Americans keep supporting it. What about China? What about Taiwan? And so on. So we have all these questions that are up in the open right now, and everyone's trying to navigate their way through this minefield.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, India is obviously doing FTAs with various nations, with Australia, with New Zealand, with the EU. We have done one with the UAE. We're talking about something else once again with the UAE. So everyone's trying to find some way of navigating this, and so this is going to be the decade of change. And I imagine that in 2030, the world will look significantly different than what it is right now.
Hmm.
I'm not saying there could be wars. I hope
Right.
there is no war. I hope there is no World War III. A World War III is a disaster for the world. It could signify the end of humanity potentially,
Right.
because a World War III means a nuclear exchange between the major nations, which is end of it. It is a nightmare. It's a doomsday scenario. So I hope there is no World War III.
Hmm.
But there could be more contained, more localized wars. Potentially, India, Pakistan could be one. If Xi Jinping says, let's take Taiwan, that could be another one, which could substantially damage China. Uh, there could be something in West Asia also potentially if the Americans try to take out Iran, for example.
Hmm.
So it will all depend on what moves the Americans make. And
Right.
the Americans are essentially going after all the global sources of energy.
Hmm.
Venezuela is a global source of energy. Iran is a global source of energy. Saudi Arabia is also that thing, and so on. So the Americans are trying to secure all these sources from where China can get energy, and so can India, so that they can coerce these nations further and have more leverage.